Okay, so this is our second podcast on the Garden of Eden in our series about Midrash as a psychological backstory to the Bible. This is entitled, God Uses Bad Actors. So in the first podcast, based on a single Hebrew word, uncovered a beautiful theme that the serpent had an anger problem, and instead of being grateful for all the gifts it had, it was angry about its limitations. So now the obvious question is, why should this one bad actor bring down the whole world? I mean, that was the whole world. The answer is that Garden of Eden is sort of a template for all of human history. In other words, God takes a bad actor and the good actor, but let's talk about the bad actor, and he runs with it. He uses this bad actor as someone who can test people, because that's what life is about. It's a series of tests and setbacks and disappointments. Also, we are going to try to pass these tests and grow from them, and that is what that's what the oral tradition sees as the meaning of life, growing from adversity. That's what it's all about. So this is a perfect snapshot. The Garden of Eden, you have this angry serpent trying to get Eve in trouble, so she'll give some forbidden fruit to her husband, as we said, knock him off, they'll go right into the sunset together. So that's the first answer. Why did this have to happen? It doesn't seem fair. That's the way the world runs, and there are bad actors throughout history. I can mention many of them right through our time. Hitler, Stalin. I mean, go throughout history, you can see bad actors. I guess this is a comforting thought. It's very important for me to get this across. This is a comforting thought, because when you see chaos in the world, you think, is God in control of this? And the answer is, God is using this. God is taking those bad actors and he's putting out a series of tests. It's not just individual tests, it's tests of nations, tests of statesmen. All these people are being tested, and that's what looks like chaos, but it's actually quite controlled chaos. Okay? But I must admit that there is something very interesting that the oral tradition has brought up, and they actually question one specific fact. Adam and Eve were immortal, and because they fell, so now we got rid of immortality. All of us will die because of Adam and Eve messing up. So the Medrash kind of pushes back on God and says, is this really fair? I mean, there is a notion in the oral tradition that the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, is actually a template that God looked at and created the world from. So if that's true, and in the Bible there is reference to the mortality of man, I will give you that quote. It says in Numbers 19:14, "This is the law of a man who dies in his tent." So the rabbis ask, wait a second, if this is your blueprint for creation and it talks about the mortality of man, how could you blame Adam and Eve for losing immortality? It's not fair. And so, although there's no answer given, the assumption is this probably means that it was something that was meant to happen. The test, of course, God knows in advance who's going to pass and not pass the test, but it seems that it was almost inevitable that the world had to be shaped in this way, that we were destined, as I said, to struggle and grow and not have this beautiful, idyllic life in paradise where you didn't have to do anything. And of course, Adam and Eve were tested. Did they appreciate living in paradise, having to just stretch out their hand and get a beautiful fruit or vegetable? They had to be tested also to see if they deserve what they had. Okay, that concludes this podcast, and I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast, which is entitled, Why Did God Want to Withhold Wisdom from Mankind? That's going to be the third one in our series on the Garden of Eden and the Midrash as the psychological backstory to the Bible. See you then.